We begin our story in late June, with a couple driving down a country road to Hackett's Quarry summer camp, where they have been hired as camp counselors. The passenger, Laura, jokes with her boyfriend, Max, about how they are lost, but Max denies it. As Laura looks at a pamphlet to search for the camp's address, something appears in the middle of the road. Max swerves to avoid it but ends up going off-road and crashes into a tree stump, damaging their vehicle. They come to a stop in the middle of the woods. Max questions Laura about what was in the road, but they can't agree. They check the damage, and Laura goes to the trunk to fetch some tools for Max. While there, she decides to snoop through his luggage and finds a college rejection letter that he hasn't told her about. As Max works on the car, Laura thinks she spots someone watching them. Despite Max's protests, she decides to investigate. She walks into the woods and finds unusual objects, such as a poster for a traveling freak show called Harem Scarum. Laura begins hearing a woman whisper the name Silas. Feeling like she's being stalked, she runs back to Max. Panicked, she tells Max that someone is out there stalking them, but he doesn't believe her right away. They try to drive off, but the car is stuck in the mud. Suddenly, a police officer pulls up and questions why they're so deep in the woods. The officer notices the car's damage. Laura answers honestly, saying something jumped out in front of them, causing them to swerve off the road. The officer is suspicious of her story, but decides to help them by pulling their car back onto the road. He questions the couple again, demanding to know what's really going on. Laura tells him the truth that they're headed to Hackett's Quarry to be camp counselors. The officer points out they're a night early and doesn't seem pleased. He orders them to stay at a nearby motel, but Laura disagrees. The officer insists and has Laura step out so he can mark the motel's location on their map. He marks the motel, but Laura slyly asks where the camp is to. As the officer instinctively begins to mark it, he pulls his pencil back, but Laura catches a glimpse of where he was going to point. The officer then says the motel staff will give them directions tomorrow. The officer lets them go, and the couple is freaked out by the officer's creepy demeanor. Laura shows Max the map and insists they're going to the camp anyway. They arrive at Hackett's Quarry expecting someone to greet them, but no one is there. Max is frustrated with Laura, as she never actually spoke to anyone and only left a voicemail about showing up one night early. He decides to wait in the car and suggests going to the motel instead. Laura tries the front door, but there's no answer. She searches around the property for a way in and finds a chained basement cellar door. She looks inside and sees someone. She calls out, but the figure runs off. Laura wants to help and asks Max to bring tools to break the lock. They descend into the cellar. Max is skeptical and waits behind as Laura explores. She finds a collar with the name Ian on it, and a fresh, stripped clean corpse. Max tries to convince her to leave, but he is suddenly attacked by something. Laura runs to help him but he's in shock and bleeding heavily. As she tries to pull him up the stairs, he's yanked away by the attacker, screaming in pain. Laura is then incapacitated from behind with a needle. It turns out to be the officer from earlier. He fires a few shots into the cellar and yells angrily that they didn't go to the motel. 2 months later, in late August, a group of camp counselors are seen waving goodbye to a bus full of children finishing their stay at Hackett's Quarry. Jacob speaks with fellow counselor, Caitlin, who teases him about his breakup with another counselor, named Emma. She then asks Jacob to get the rest of the bags from inside and help pack the van for the trip home. He knocks on the front door, which is answered by another counselor, Dylan. Jacob asks for help with the bags, but Dylan jokingly says the door is broken and shuts it on him. Jacob climbs through a side window and grabs the bags. He loads them into the van and asks Caitlin if the van is even roadworthy. He then gives her a playful hypothetical on how could he disable the van so they could stay one more night at camp, hoping to win Emma back. She gives him some ideas but warns him not to go through with it as she doesn't think his plan will work anyway. Jacob secretly disables the fuel line, planning to fix it the next day. Dylan and fellow counselor, Nick, come out onto the porch, where Nick tosses Jacob's phone to him. The group complains about not having their phones for a while and how low their batteries are. Nearby at the camp cabins, another counselor, named Abby, is spending some alone time drawing a picture. Fellow counselor and Jacob's ex-girlfriend, Emma, is eager to leave the camp and wants to grab their bags, but the door to the cabin is locked. Emma wants to kick the door down, but Abby thinks they'll get in trouble with Mr. Hackett. Emma proceeds anyway and Abby decides to help. Inside, Emma grabs the bags and leaves the cabin. Abby takes one last look around and notices a stuffed animal that belonged to one of the kids, where she decides to keep it. Outside, Emma is waiting for Abby with a golf cart. As they drive back to the lodge, Emma pesters Abby about her crush on Nick, but Abby tries to deny it. They come to a fork in the road where Emma wants to take a scenic detour. Abby reluctantly agrees. Emma goes on to brag about being an influencer and how her subscribers need her back online. Abby stops at a small beach. Across the lake, they spot a secluded island with a tall wooden fort, but they're confused when they see smoke coming from near it. Unsure of what's causing it, they decide to ignore it and head back to the lodge. Back at the lodge, the group continues to complain about not having their phone chargers and their batteries being low. Abby and Emma arrive, and Emma loads her bag into the van. Dylan nudges Nick to help Abby with her bag, knowing they have a crush on each other. Another counselor, Ryan, joins the group. He starts talking about a podcast he was just listening to, which told a ghost story about the camp, called The Hag of Hackett's Quarry. He explains the story is about an old woman who died in a fire a few years ago. She supposedly haunts the woods, looking for a lost baby boy, and if she catches you alone, she might kill you, or try to turn you into her son. Chris Hackett, the owner of the camp, calls down to the counselors to pack up and get moving. Caitlin asks him for the keys to the van, but he says he left them in the office. He asks Ryan to come with him. Inside Chris's office, just as Ryan is about to tell him something important, the phone rings. Chris asks Ryan to leave the room, demanding privacy. Ryan exits, but can't help himself and decides to eavesdrop. He overhears Chris talking to someone on the phone, being urged to hurry up and get the counselors to leave the camp. Chris insists everything is fine. As the conversation continues, Ryan hears the figure on the phone mention to Chris that him and someone named Bobby are geared up, but don't mention why. Frustrated, Chris hangs up the phone. Chris catches Ryan eavesdropping, but doesn't seem to mind. As Chris searches for the keys, Ryan asks him for advice about college, but Chris is clearly distracted and appears to be in a rush. Ryan asks if everything is okay, but Chris dodges the question. Chris claims Ryan is his favorite counselor, but warns him to stop telling scary stories to the kids as the parents are complaining their kids return home scared. Ryan again asks if everything is okay. Chris finally says he just wants everyone to leave the camp before sunset. When Ryan asks why, Chris gives a vague excuse, saying it's dangerous to drive in the dark. Ryan picks up a picture of Chris with his two kids, Caleb and Kaylee. He asks Chris to tell them he said goodbye, as he hasn't seen them since camp ended, which Chris agrees. Chris finally finds the keys. They head outside to the van, and Chris hands them to Jacob. Jacob hops in and tries to start the van, but he already knows it won't start as he disabled the fuel line earlier. Chris becomes slightly more agitated. He jumps in and tries to start it himself, but the engine catches fire. After a few moments as the engine cools off, Jacob suggests they spend one more night. Chris panics, saying he can't let that happen. Chris paces around, trying to think. He throws Ryan the keys to the lodge and takes him aside for a private conversation. He demands that Ryan make sure everyone stays inside the lodge for the night, and to lock the doors to ensure no one enters or leaves. Ryan agrees but asks where Chris is going. Chris doesn't say. As he leaves, he shouts to keep the doors locked and the noise down. Emma is in disbelief, while Jacob is thrilled that his plan worked. Realizing they're now alone, Dylan makes a bold suggestion to start partying and have a bonfire. Abby and Ryan initially disagree, but realize they don't have much of a choice. Jacob assigns everyone a task. He assigns Nick and Abby to gather firewood, plans to raid the camp store with Emma for supplies, and jokingly tells Dylan to take care of charging the phones. As the group discusses their plans, an old man, named Jedediah, is watching them through a sniper scope. He takes out a jar and smears what appears to be blood all over his face. His burly, also bloody son, Bobby, hammers a sign into the ground that reads hunting season, and they begin walking into the campground. Down at the camp store, Emma records herself and Jacob breaking in. Jacob struggles with the lock, so Emma takes matters into her own hands and kicks the door in. As they search the store, Emma finds a safe, but it's locked. They head into the back room and find a staff-only door. Emma, clearly fond of kicking things, tries again, but this time the door is too strong, and she hurts her leg. Jacob picks the lock instead, and Emma holds the door open to keep it from locking behind them. Jacob grabs some beer, while Emma looks around. She finds a gun with a note attached that has the code to the safe. She decides to keep the gun. Emma unknowingly makes an interesting discovery. She finds two camping backpacks with large claw marks and blood on them. She asks Jacob if a bear did it, but they don't investigate further. Back at the front, Emma uses the code to open the safe. Inside, she finds ammo for the gun. Jacob convinces her to also take the fireworks. As Jacob continues looking around, Emma tries to bring up the torn and bloody backpacks, but Jacob is too distracted by discovering what he calls the greatest snack of all time, peanut butter pops. Finally done with their raid, they leave the store. Back in Chris Hackett's office, Dylan and Ryan begin charging their phones. Dylan wants to snoop around Chris's office, despite Ryan's disapproval. Dylan picks up the phone, where a woman creepily whispers Dylan's name, but he doesn't think much of it. Behind the desk, the pair investigate a trapdoor and debate why Chris would have it. Dylan wants to know more and climbs down the ladder, which leads to a basement cellar. He jokes with Ryan that there's nothing down there, but notes that it's spooky and smells unusual. He climbs back up the ladder and searches the desk. Inside a drawer, Dylan finds a ledger that lists the names of all the counselors. He mentions to Ryan about how two counselors named Laura and Max never showed up and reminds Ryan that they had to work their shifts for them. Dylan wants to open the locked door and asks Ryan for the keys. He opens the door, which leads to Chris's bedroom and bathroom, but they don't find anything special. However, he searches the closet and discovers a hidden door behind the clothing. Dylan enters and calls for Ryan to come inside. They are surprised to find a hidden lair with security monitors broadcasting trail cameras placed around the camp. They debate what Chris is doing with the cameras but can't agree on why he would go to such lengths to hide the lair. Ryan decides he's had enough of snooping around Chris's stuff and leaves. Dylan decides to check the monitors and watches the trail cameras for a few moments. He sees someone approach a trail camera and disable it, but doesn't think much of it. Dylan exits the lair. Satisfied with their search and the phones partially charged, they exit the office. In the woods, Nick and Abby are walking around, looking for firewood and having somewhat awkward conversations about their time during the summer. They walk down a path called Shady Glade, where Abby comments that ever since the campers left, she feels like something has been watching them. Nick waits for Abby as she draws a picturesque sunset near a cliffside. They decide to head back to camp before it gets too dark. At the campfire spot, Caitlin takes a picture of the treehouse on the secluded island. Dylan shows up and tells her that Chris has trail cameras set up all around the camp, but Caitlin doesn't think it's unusual and believes it's to keep track of the campers. She then shows them the picture she took and mentions a weird light inside the treehouse. Ryan jokes that it's the hag of Hackett's Quarry, but Caitlin is annoyed. Abby and Nick arrive with their firewood, and Emma and Jacob bring a wheelbarrow full of supplies from the camp store. Jacob is excited to share the fantastic news about the peanut butter pops with Nick as they begin laughing and dancing while singing the Butter Pops theme song. Later at the campfire, everyone is drinking and having a good time. Dylan suggests playing Truth or Dare, and everyone agrees. Caitlin dares Emma to kiss Jacob or Nick. To Jacob's dismay, she chooses Nick. They kiss for a while, and Jacob becomes jealous and demands they stop. Emma sits back down next to Abby and says Nick is a good kisser, but Abby is upset and walks off. Jacob is furious and yells at Nick for enjoying the moment too much before storming off. Seeing Abby upset, Nick chases after her, and Emma goes after Jacob. Caitlin tries to joke and lighten the mood, but nobody laughs. Nearby, Jedediah and Bobby have been spying on the counselors from a distance, watching as they played Truth or Dare. Abby is walking through the woods, trying to convince herself that Nick's kiss with Emma meant nothing, but she soon realizes she is lost. As she wanders, she begins to hear a woman whispering and becomes increasingly freaked out. Still lost, she hears strange noises coming from the woods. Luckily, Nick calls out to her, and she responds. Nick finds her and is happy to see her. He tries to talk about what happened back at the campfire, but Abby feels awkward and doesn't know what to say. She eventually confronts Nick about Emma, but he denies having any feelings for her. As they kiss, something begins creeping up on them. They hear growling in the distance and cautiously search for the source. Nick spots it and shouts for Abby to run, but he is attacked by what appears to be a furless creature. A gunshot rings out, hitting the creature and freeing Nick. Abby rushes to help him but is also attacked. Another gunshot hits the creature, and it runs off. Abby flees through the woods, down a set of stairs, and hides near a cliffside. As the creature searches for her, she tries to escape but is attacked again. Another gunshot drives it away, but it's unclear whether she was bitten. She runs back to camp in a panic. At the lake, Jacob is sitting on a pier, emotional after witnessing Emma kiss with Nick. Emma finds him and tries to explain, saying they aren't really together and that their relationship was just a summer fling. Jacob agrees but presses her about her and Nick, but Emma is playing games. Frustrated with her, he starts to leave. Emma convinces him to grab some towels and go for a swim. Jacob likes the idea and heads to a nearby lookout to find towels. He goes upstairs but doesn't find any, so he shouts down to Emma that there aren't any left. He picks up a pair of binoculars and sees movement inside the treehouse on the island across the lake, but decides not to investigate and assumes it was nothing. Jacob returns to Emma, who cannonballs into the lake. She teases him to join her, and he enthusiastically jumps in. They splash around and have some fun for a bit. Jacob climbs back onto the pier, while Emma decides to swim across the lake. Jacob then hears screaming and gunshots in the distance. He yells to Emma, thinking it sounded like Abby, but Emma says she can't hear him as she's too far away. Concerned, Jacob decides to leave Emma and go check it out. Back at the campfire, Dylan, Ryan, and Caitlin are still drinking and talking when they also hear the screaming and gunshots. Just as they prepare to investigate, Abby arrives, bloody and desperate, begging for help for Nick. Caitlin throws Ryan the shotgun and asks him to go find Nick. Ryan runs into the woods. He sprints down dirt paths where he finds Nick being dragged by Bobby. He points the shotgun at Bobby, demanding he let Nick go, or he'll shoot. When Bobby refuses, Ryan fires. Bobby drops Nick and flees into the forest. Ryan helps Nick up and they head back to camp. Meanwhile, Jacob is running through the woods, trying to find his way but realizes he is lost. He's spooked when he hears a boar grunt nearby and suddenly steps into a trap, getting hoisted upside down by a rope. As he struggles to free himself, Bobby appears. Jacob pleads with him, and Bobby pulls out a knife and decides to cut him down. Bobby tells Jacob to be quiet and to keep his eyes closed. He pours a vial of blood on Jacob's face, saying it's for his own good. Bobby walks away into the forest. Freaked out, Jacob sprints back to camp. At the campfire, Abby frantically recounts her story, and Caitlin asks her to try and draw what attacked her. Ryan and Dylan are helping Nick and ask what happened. Nick, in terrible pain, says he was attacked by some kind of animal. Ryan says he only saw a large man dragging him and assumes Bobby is the attacker. Nick tries to correct him, suggesting it was more likely a bear, but Dylan and Ryan are skeptical as a full-sized bear would have easily crushed him. Dylan notices Nick's wound is badly infected, with black seepage oozing from it. He makes a bold and controversial suggestion to amputate Nick's leg, but Ryan strongly disagrees. They hear movement in the bushes. Ryan readies the gun just in case, but it's just Jacob, shouting for them not to shoot. He sees Nick's condition, and Caitlin explains that he was attacked by something. Ryan asks where Emma is. Jacob sheepishly admits he left her back at the lake, where she swam to the island. Caitlin mentions she thought she saw someone on the island earlier, which unsettles Jacob. Ryan then questions the blood on Jacob's face. Jacob explains that some guy poured it on him but avoids going into detail. He grabs the gun from Ryan, and the two argue over who needs it more. Caitlin insists on keeping the gun to protect Nick and Abby. Jacob storms off alone to find Emma on the island. Caitlin and Ryan come up with a plan to wheelbarrow Nick back to the lodge. On the island, Emma is recording a video of herself explaining that she's on a tiny island with a creepy treehouse she plans to investigate for her subscribers. She enters the treehouse, joking that in another universe, she and Jacob could settle down there. Continuing to record, she hears a loud noise coming from a trapdoor above her. She sarcastically jokes about opening it and dying a painful death. She first searches a nearby bag, putting on some clothes and grabbing bear spray and a taser that someone left behind. Emma climbs the ladder and opens the trapdoor, only for a creature to drop down. She panics and uses the taser on it, then takes a photo. Realizing she's in genuine danger, she tries to escape down the wooden walkway, but the creature cuts her off. She uses the bear spray and dashes back inside the treehouse. She blocks the door with a chair, but the creature jumps through the window. Emma uses the bear spray again and climbs up the ladder to the top floor. Back at the lodge, the group helps Nick inside. Dylan and Ryan remember the landline phone in Chris's office and decide to call for help. Dylan mentions he suspects that whatever attacked Nick might be following their trail, but Ryan is unsure. Inside the office, Dylan grabs the gun off the wall and tells Ryan to call the police, but unfortunately, the phone is dead. Dylan becomes increasingly suspicious of everything happening, saying there are too many coincidences. He suggests going to the radio tower where he used to do morning announcements to call for help. Ryan doesn't trust Dylan with the gun and demands he put it back, but Dylan claims he knows how to use it and keeps it. The power goes out, further confirming Dylan's suspicions about their unusual situation. Outside the office, Ryan tries to convince Dylan to give the gun to Caitlin, but Dylan disagrees, until Caitlin shows up. Outside the lodge, Dylan finally agrees and gives Ryan the gun, admitting he doesn't really know how to use it. At the top of the treehouse, Emma is desperately trying to escape. She reels in a zip line, but it makes loud creaky noises, attracting the creature. She makes a jump for the handle and zips down to the water, where she escapes, but realizes her taser got wet and no longer works. Inside the lodge kitchen, Abby tends to Nick. Caitlin informs them that Dylan and Ryan are heading to the radio hut to call for help. Abby asks how she got the gun, and Caitlin replies that Ryan convinced Dylan to give it to her. Suddenly, they hear someone walking around upstairs in the lodge. They begin panicking, but Caitlin offers to check it out. She heads up the stairs and sees Bobby searching around the lodge with a sniper. Bobby enters a room, and Caitlin spies on him from outside. She hears him talking into a radio, saying he hasn't found the other counselors yet. Bobby exits the room and catches Caitlin by surprise. She points her gun at him, but Bobby snatches it away. Caitlin runs to the kitchen and warns the others that they need to flee. As they try to escape, Bobby grabs Abby, but Nick charges and fights him. He chokes Bobby, then releases him, shocked by his own unusually high strength. They escape as Bobby regathers himself. At the radio hut, Dylan is trying to rewire the radio to send an emergency message but isn't sure how far it will reach. He records a confusing message, saying the counselors have been attacked by bears and mentioning hunters in the area who are shooting at both the bears and the counselors. He sends the message and switches to a receiving channel, where he hears someone talking about two males inside the radio hut and that they're on their way. Dylan and Ryan panic, realizing they've just revealed their location and someone is coming for them. They decide to run back to the lodge, but there's another creature outside the door. They remain quiet, hoping the creature will leave, but it climbs onto the roof. Dylan finally realizes it isn't bears chasing them. Ryan looks out the window and sees Caitlin, Abby and Nick approaching. He uses the announcement system to warn them to stay away from the radio hut and get inside a nearby cabin. Dylan has an idea to create a high-pitched noise with the announcement system to scare off the creature. He tries to wire it, but the creature has pulled one of the wires above them. Dylan reaches for the wire, but the creature reaches in and bites him. He escapes the creature's grasp, yelling that the pain from the bite wound is spreading up his arm and demands that Ryan chop it off. Ryan grabs a nearby chainsaw and chops off Dylan's hand. Dylan tells Ryan to hit the button for the announcement system, which emits a loud noise that scares the creature away. Dylan is in total shock and says he deeply regrets having Ryan chop his hand off. They bandage his arm and meet with the others outside. Ryan informs them that hunters may have intercepted the emergency message sent over the radio and that they are on the way. The group hears multiple gunshots across the cabins near the pool. They see a woman with an eye patch running toward it where they decide to chase after her, but she's gone by the time they arrive. They are met with a grim sight of a body floating in the pool, but they're unable to tell who it is. Meanwhile, in the woods, Jacob is searching for Emma, but hears a woman creepily whisper his name, unsettling him. He walks to a nearby wooden shack, where Emma screams very loudly and scares him. He exclaims that he's happy to see her, but Emma punches him in the nose and blames him for leaving her alone back at the lake. She then asks Jacob what is going on around the camp. He tries to explain that some kind of bear attacked Nick and Abby, but Emma corrects him and says it definitely wasn't a bear as one attacked her back at the treehouse. Jacob adds that there are a couple of hunters running around too, and that they are the ones who poured blood on his face, though he can't explain why they did it. Suddenly, they hear growling from the bushes. They begin running and head across a wooden walkway, but another creature cuts them off. It lunges at them but misses, causing Emma to fall off the walkway. Jacob continues to run, leaving Emma behind again. He trips near a boar's head propped up on a stick and finds himself surrounded by bear traps. He stumbles into one and gets his foot caught. He tries to pry himself out but is unable to. Jedediah walks up and knocks Jacob out. At the pool, Caitlin, Ryan, Nick and Abby debate what to do about the body floating in the water. Ryan reveals a terrible truth and claims he recognizes the body as Kaylee Hackett, Chris Hackett's daughter. As Nick holds Abby, she notices that he's acting very strange and aggressive. He whispers that he wants to taste Abby, and won't let go of her. Freaked out by his behavior, she pushes him into the pool. Nick panics in the water and acts as if he's being tortured by it. The group helps him out and brings him into the pool house to dry off. Inside the pool house, Nick apologizes to Abby while she cares for him. Caitlin gives Dylan some medication for his hand and explains they need to keep track of what's going on as potential evidence for the police. She begins discussing Nick, saying something isn't right with him, and Ryan notes Nick's unusual hydrophobia earlier in the pool. Caitlin then tells them how she tried to clean his wounds back at the lodge, but despite his clothes being bloody, she couldn't find any sign of him being scratched or bitten. Nick asks Abby if she likes him, but Abby doesn't think it's the right time to talk about their relationship. Nick becomes agitated and berates Abby, calling her names. She demands he stop acting strange, but Nick grabs her and throws her across the room with inhuman strength. Nick stands up and eyes Abby down. Knowing something is terribly wrong with him, she picks up the gun and shoots him in the shoulder. At first, Nick writhes in pain, but it's soon clear the bullet has no effect. He stands back up and begins to transform, shedding his skin and taking on a similar appearance of the creature that bit him. Letting out a howl, he leaps out the window and disappears into the woods. Emma finds her way back to the fire pit after being abandoned by Jacob again. She warms herself by the fire and realizes she needs to head to the lodge to find everyone else. As she walks down the path, she spots the hunters Jacob warned her about and hides behind a tree. She spies on them and sees they are trying to deal with a creature that has been caught in a trap. Bobby spots her behind the tree, so Jedediah grabs her and throws her to the ground. Bobby asks Jedediah if she's been bitten, but he doesn't think so. Emma kicks Jedediah in the stomach and runs for the lodge. She shouts for anyone, but there is no response. Unsure of what to do, she jumps into the van to rest. Inside the pool house, Abby is in shock over what just happened to Nick. Ryan begins to ask where Emma and Jacob are, questioning their safety. Suddenly, a woman knocks on the door, demanding to know where Chris Hackett is and saying she needs their help. Ryan orders her to state her name. The woman claims to be Laura and says she needs to be let in, but Ryan thinks she's the crazy woman they saw earlier who was running around with a gun shooting people, but she denies it. Dylan interrupts, asking her if she's the counselor who never showed up to camp with another counselor named Max. Laura confirms this, and Dylan convinces them to let her in, revealing Laura to be the woman with the eye patch. They question Laura about why she never showed up to camp. Laura begins to tell her story, bringing them back to late June, the night Max was attacked in the basement of the lodge and Laura was drugged by the officer. Laura wakes up in a jail cell, where the officer drags Max in and locks him in another cell. She hears loud growling from his cell and sees a large amount of blood splatter onto the wall. The officer walks by Laura, voicing his displeasure toward them. The next morning, Laura is handcuffed and awoken by the officer for interrogation. He demands she answer some questions, such as her name and her relationship with Max. Laura decides to comply. The officer asks why they didn't go to the motel as he ordered, but Laura gives a vague answer. She then notices something important. He's actually the sheriff of North Kill County, and his last name is Hackett, though she can't see his first name. She asks if he's related to Chris Hackett, but the sheriff refuses to answer. Sheriff Hackett explains that she has no idea the terrible situation she's gotten herself into and demands she follow his orders from now on. Laura demands to know what's going on and insists on seeing Max. The sheriff says nothing, and escorts her back to her cell where she sees Max is still alive. Once the sheriff leaves, Laura and Max begin to talk about what happened. Max questions why he has no clothes on and why there's blood all over his cell. They try to piece together what happened the previous night, but before they can, the sheriff brings Max some clothes. He handcuffs Max and escorts him to his office. Laura searches her cell for a way out. She finds a bent spoon on the windowsill and a loose brick in the wall, but doesn't find a complete way to escape. A short time later, Max is brought back to his cell. As the sheriff is about to leave, Laura threatens him, claiming that once they get out, They will retaliate, but the sheriff implies they may never get out. Laura questions Max about what the sheriff asked him. They recall one odd question where he asked Max how he was feeling that morning, but didn't ask Laura the same. Laura tells Max that the sheriff's last name is Hackett and he might be related to Chris Hackett. They begin reviewing the events of the previous night, when Max was attacked by some creature. Laura recalls finding the dog collar with the name Ian on it, and how Max was viciously attacked. Max points out that despite the attack, he doesn't even have a scratch on him anymore, which they find incredibly strange. Max begins to develop a theory. He remembers that there was a full moon that night and suggests to Laura that maybe he was attacked by a werewolf. Back at the pool house in the present, Laura is interrupted in the middle of her story by Ryan, who doesn't believe her and claims her story is impossible. Dylan backs Laura's story about the werewolves. He recounts their experience when Ryan had to chop off his hand after being bitten by a werewolf. Laura claims they did the right thing, citing lycanthropy, meaning that if they hadn't, Dylan would have become a werewolf himself. Laura tries to convince Ryan that there's a lot more they don't know, and that she wants to finish her story. Laura continues. She tells them how the next few weeks were long and how she kept herself busy by talking with Max the entire time, trying to piece together why they were being held without explanation. In her jail cell, she shouts to Max that they need an escape plan, but Max responds that she keeps saying that, despite them being there for weeks. He also says he's possibly a werewolf, so escaping would be futile until they can figure out how to cure him, but Laura remains skeptical about Max being a werewolf. Max offers two options. He explains that one option is to be nice to Sheriff Hackett and get on his good side, or to catch him off guard and make their escape. Laura debates trying the first option, but Max says he was being rhetorical as he doesn't think the sheriff even has a good side. Still, Laura wants to try anyway. Sometime later, Sheriff Hackett brings them their food. Laura and Max try to soften him up by playing nice, but he sees through them and doesn't buy it. As he's leaving, Laura yells that they know Max is a werewolf and that the next full moon is in a few days. The sheriff scolds her, claiming she doesn't know the half of it. A few days later, on the night of the full moon, Sheriff Hackett brings Laura out of her cell and handcuffs her to a pipe in front of Max's cell. He tells her she's going to witness Max's curse and leaves for the night. Laura watches as Max becomes incredibly sick. He begins growling loudly. He stands up and sheds his skin, transforming into a werewolf. Laura is too close. Max rushes toward her and swipes at her, blinding her in one eye and accidentally cutting the handcuffs. She runs to the bathroom to search for medical supplies. After wrapping her head with a bandage, she heads back to check on Max, but he takes another swipe at her. She walks into the lobby, searching for more information about Sheriff Hackett. She tries the exit doors, but they're locked. Upstairs, she enters a rundown office. Inside a locker, she finds a needle with a sedative, similar to the one the sheriff used on her earlier, and decides she can hide it in her cell for later. Back downstairs, she finds a letter revealing that the sheriff's name is Travis. She enters Travis's office, where she sees a phone she hopes to use to call for help. But when she picks it up, a woman whispers random nonsense. She hangs up and tries again, but finds it odd when the phone isn't even working. She logs into Travis's computer and finds an email from Chris, talking about the need to shut down a podcast that keeps bringing up mysterious events at Hackett's Quarry. The email includes a link to the podcast, which Laura listens to. It mentions the Hag of Hackett's Quarry, a woman who died in a tragic fire along with her son. The computer begins glitching, and Laura hears a woman whisper the name Silas before the computer freezes. She decides to return to her cell and hides the needle in the wall, waiting for the right time to use it on Travis. Exhausted, Laura goes to sleep. The next day, Travis wakes her up. He clearly sees that she's escaped her cuffs and her face has been clawed. He asks what happened, but Laura is vague and she doesn't give much information. He searches her in case she found anything during the night, but finds nothing and locks her back in her cell. The following day, Travis hands Max a tablet, telling him to watch something, calling it educational. Travis grabs a chair and sits next to Laura's cell. A critical conversation is about to take place. For the first time, Travis vaguely explains what's going on and tells Laura that she and Max are in just as much trouble as he and his family, and that nothing is what it seems. Travis hands her a paper and asks her to read it as it will give answers. Laura begins reading a poem out loud. It explains that anyone bitten by a werewolf is cursed and will transform on nights with a full moon. To lift the curse, one must kill the werewolf who bit them during a full moon, but only silver is fatal to them. It also says that if someone has just been bitten, they can quickly sever the limb to stop the curse before it fully takes effect. Laura finally understands how the werewolf curse works and tells Travis she wants to cure Max. She questions why he didn't kill the werewolf that bit Max in the basement cellar on the night they arrived, but Travis says it's not that straightforward and continues to be cryptic. Laura accuses him of not telling the whole truth. She suspects he's protecting someone, which is why he didn't kill Max's werewolf. Travis doesn't answer any more questions and has had enough. He grabs the tablet from Max and leaves the holding area. Max and Laura talk. Laura admits she thinks Travis is telling the truth about the curse and wants to plan an escape. The tablet Max watched showed video of him as a werewolf, attacking Laura and injuring her eye. He apologizes, and Laura forgives him, saying she knows he wouldn't hurt her intentionally. A couple of weeks later, Laura hears Chris arguing with Travis. Chris accuses Travis of holding the missing counselors in the holding area. Travis defends himself, saying because Chris bit one of them, he had no choice. Chris brings up the night in the cellar when Travis shot him while he was a werewolf attacking Max. But Travis knew it wouldn't kill him, since he wasn't using silver bullets. Travis says they need to talk in private and suggests going to their office. Laura informs Max that Travis was talking to Chris and that Chris is the werewolf who bit him that night. She feels foolish for not realizing sooner that Travis won't kill the werewolf that bit Max because it would mean killing his own brother. Laura decides it's almost time to escape. She tells Max their goal is to kill Chris, which will cure Max's curse. Days later, Max calls for Travis and yells that Laura is in pain. Travis enters her cell and checks on her, but Laura surprises him by sedating him with a hidden needle. Travis quickly passes out. Laura steals his keys and gun, then frees Max. They head to the lobby to grab their things. Laura wants to search for silver ammo, knowing Travis must have some. They hear a woman whispering their names from behind a locked door. They enter cautiously. Upon entry, no one is there, but on a desk is a stash of silver bullets. They take the guns and ammo and head to Hackett's Quarry, where Laura says she wants to end the curse that night, under the full moon. Back at the pool house, Laura finishes her story, saying she left Max at the treehouse on the island for safety. Dylan questions her about the island, worried about Jacob and Emma, who were there earlier. Laura reassures him, saying she just came from the island and only saw one werewolf and no other people. She reiterates that she needs to kill Chris before the full moon ends. She then tells another story about how at the pool, she thought she shot Chris and went back to the island, expecting Max to be cured. However, Max was still a werewolf, confirming that the werewolf Laura shot at the pool could not have been Chris Hackett. Ryan interrupts and claims she shot Kaylee Hackett. Laura is confident she shot a werewolf and that it might have turned back into human form after its death. Dylan questions Laura about why Max didn't kill her, but she shows her bite mark as proof that he did try. Ryan steals Laura's gun, afraid she might transform soon. In an unknown location, an older unknown woman checks on a werewolf she is locked in an electrified cage, calling it a dumb animal. Bobby is dragging Jacob into the same location. Jacob threatens him, but Jedediah and Bobby can only laugh. They lock Jacob in an electrified cage next to the same werewolf. In the pool house, Laura asks where Chris is, but Ryan claims she murdered Kaylee, which Laura denies. Abby walks over, and Laura is drawn to her bracelet, realizing it's made of silver. Abby gives Laura the bracelet, and Laura puts it inside a shotgun shell, telling her to use it in a worst-case scenario. Laura takes her gun back from Ryan and again demands to know where Chris is. Ryan knows, but doesn't say where. Caitlin goes to a window and points to a spooky house in the woods, but Ryan hates that Caitlin pointed it out. Ryan tries to convince Laura to find another way, but she is confident that killing Chris is the only way to cure Max. Laura states they are running out of time, and Ryan decides to go with her to the house. They head into the woods, where Laura questions why Ryan is so defensive of Chris. Ryan responds that Chris has been good to him and helped him through tough times, trying to convince Laura not to kill him. Laura claims Chris isn't the man Ryan thinks he is. They continue to the house but are blocked by fences lined with razor wire. They unknowingly step onto a wooden pallet that breaks, causing them to fall into water inside an underground cave. They exit the water, where Ryan notices that Laura's bite wound has completely healed and that her eyes are changing color, implying the werewolf curse is beginning to take effect. With no other choice, they walk through the old mine and find a path at the top of the stairs. They walk down the path that leads to a door, where they prepare themselves. At the lodge, Caitlin, Abby, and Dylan are cautiously exploring. Abby questions what happened to Jacob and Emma, but Caitlin thinks they should find help first. Outside the lodge, they hear something moving in the van. Dylan sneaks up to the door and opens it. Emma screams and sprays him with something. Dylan writhes in pain, claiming his eyes are burning and that he's blind, but Caitlin reveals it was just air freshener. Dylan fills Emma in on Laura's story. Caitlin states that the engine to the van is completely dead. She mentions a nearby scrapyard where they could search for a new vehicle and asks Dylan to come with her. Emma asks where they should stay for safety, and Dylan suggests the basement cellar under the lodge. Emma and Abby head to the basement, while Caitlin and Dylan head to the scrapyard. Back underground, Ryan and Laura are roaming unknown hallways beneath the Hackett home. The door shuts behind them, making a loud noise. Upstairs, Travis hears it and questions what it was. Travis's mother, Constance, says they have guests down there, implying Jacob and the werewolf they caught earlier are making the noise. Laura and Ryan walk down the hall to a red-lit room. They see Jacob in total shock, sitting inside one of the cages. Ryan wants to open the cage, but Laura points out that it's electrified. Jacob tells them there's a power box in the room that can free him. Upstairs, Constance questions why Travis is inside, explaining they need to continue trying to keep the counselors safe. Travis reveals to Constance that her granddaughter Kaylee is dead from a silver bullet and that her body is being brought in. This enrages Constance, and she begins to blame Travis for her death. Downstairs, Laura is about to shoot the werewolf, but Ryan stops her. Laura thinks this werewolf is Chris, but Ryan says she can't be sure, claiming it could even be their friend Nick. Jacob wants Ryan to focus on getting him out, but they hear Constance yelling upstairs where she is berating Travis for letting Laura and Max escape and for obtaining his silver ammo. Ryan opens Jacob's door. Jacob asks where Emma is, but Ryan says he doesn't know and tells Jacob to find her and escape. Ryan and Laura are at a trapdoor, eavesdropping on Constance still berating Travis. She says he should have shot Laura and Max when he was holding them for 2 months. Travis tries to defend himself but admits he has regrets. Constance and Travis hear a noise at the trapdoor. They slowly approach, and quickly open it, grabbing Laura by her hair. Ryan flees, and Travis says he's going to send Bobby down. In the forest, Dylan and Caitlin are heading to the scrapyard to search for a working car. Dylan brings up his missing hand, calling it unique, and Caitlin tries to keep his spirits up, saying they'll laugh about it in a few years. As they enter the scrapyard, Dylan is startled by the motion sensor lights. Inside the Hackett house, Laura is dragged by Constance but manages to escape and points her gun at them. Constance turns off the lights and tries to sneak up on Laura to grab her gun, but fails. Travis yells for everyone to stop and gives the room some light. Bobby comes out of the cellar while holding Ryan at knife point. Constance informs the family they're no longer going to protect the counselors as retaliation for Kaylee's death. As everyone is distracted by Laura, Ryan struggles with Bobby, who ends up stabbing him. Ryan runs and escapes into a dumbwaiter. Constance, furious with Laura, takes Jedediah's gun and shoots her. Somewhere in the house, Ryan attempts to pull the knife out of his body, but decides it's better to leave it in. While searching for a way out, he tries to open a door but finds it locked. He looks through the keyhole and sees Bobby coming down the hall. Ryan hides under the bed. As Bobby searches the room, Ryan leaves and escapes down a hallway, but makes too much noise. Bobby follows him, but Ryan ducks into another room and blocks the door. Upstairs, Laura wakes up. The family didn't know she was cursed with lycanthropy and can only be killed by silver. She begins looking for a way out, walking through several rooms and hallways. Just as she enters an empty room, Jedediah and Constance walk in. Seeing that she's still alive, they realize she's cursed. Jedediah shoots her again. Standing over her, he explains he doesn't have enough silver to kill her, but he will make her suffer. Laura successfully defends herself against Jedediah. She hits a nearby power box, which causes the gates in the cellar to open. Travis barges into the room and demands that everyone stop. The parents demand he shoot Laura with silver, but he hesitates, allowing Laura to escape. Somewhere else in the house, Ryan is still trying to avoid Bobby, but Bobby catches up to him. Ryan pleads to be let go, but he refuses. Ryan pulls the knife out of his side and stabs Bobby. Bobby flees the room in pain. Laura appears, seemingly on the verge of transforming. She sees Ryan bleeding out. She apologizes for getting him into this situation and that people continue to get hurt even though she is trying to avoid it. Ryan asks if he's dying. Laura doesn't say yes, but tells him he's lost a lot of blood. Laura proposes a controversial idea. She could bite Ryan, giving him the healing properties of the curse. However, she warns that they must kill Chris soon to lift the curse. Ryan thinks it over and eventually agrees. Laura bites Ryan's arm, officially transferring the werewolf curse to him. She helps him up, and they escape up some stairs to the attic. Back at the scrapyard, Caitlin and Dylan are still searching for a working car. They find a magnetic crane holding a vehicle that looks usable. Caitlin asks Dylan to operate the crane while she keeps watch with the gun. Inside the crane, Dylan accidentally hits a button that plays loud music. He swings the car around and lowers it for Caitlin to examine. At the other end of the scrapyard, Dylan sees motion-activated lights turn on. He sounds the horn to warn Caitlin that something is coming. A werewolf appears. Caitlin climbs into the car as Dylan lifts it higher, but the werewolf follows. Dylan swings the car around to shake the werewolf off, but Caitlin falls out. The werewolf jumps down toward her, but Dylan drops the car on it just in time, saving Caitlin. Unfortunately, the car is now destroyed, so Caitlin suggests they head back to the lodge. In the basement cellar, Emma and Abby are waiting around. Emma, bored, encourages Abby to find something to do. Abby investigates a power box that's missing a main fuse. They suspect the hunters sabotaged it earlier when they attacked the lodge. Abby then notices a ladder leading up to a trapdoor. Emma urges her to check it out. Abby climbs the ladder, which leads into Chris's office. Meanwhile, in the attic of the Hackett house, Laura and Ryan continue searching for Chris, until they find a werewolf chained up in front of them. Laura suspects it might be Chris but is unsure. The werewolf breaks its chains and approaches them, but they all fall into a room with the rest of the Hackett family. The werewolf begins attacking Bobby, and Laura finally transforms. She slashes Travis, causing him to drop his shotgun. The other werewolf kills Bobby, then turns on Constance and kills her, before finally killing Jedediah. Ryan grabs the shotgun and chooses to kill the werewolf. Laura, still in werewolf form, is attacking Travis, but suddenly transforms back to human, confirming the other werewolf was Chris and officially ending their curse. Travis, Ryan, and Laura have a revealing conversation. Laura believes everything is back to normal, but Travis says it's not over. He explains that Chris was not the first werewolf. Chris's children, Caleb and Kaylee, were also cursed, with Caleb being the first bitten, who then bit his sister and father. Laura asks the obvious question of who bit Caleb? Travis reveals it was a werewolf named Silas. Travis explains they've been hunting the white wolf, Silas, for years, trying to end their family's curse. Ryan recalls seeing a white wolf earlier, and Travis urgently asks where. Ryan says he saw it by the cabins earlier that night. Travis tells Laura he believes Silas is the one who ran her and Max off the road 2 months ago when they first arrived. He asks for Laura and Ryan's help to finally end the curse. Laura is hesitant to trust Travis, but he insists that once Silas is dead, the curse will be lifted for everyone. They agree to help Travis. Travis says he thinks he knows where to find Silas, and they begin the hunt. A flashback from 6 years ago plays, explaining the origins of the werewolf curse. A woman named Eliza is revealed to be the hag of Hackett's Quarry. She watches her traveling freak show, Harum Scarum, burn in a massive fire. Her son, Silas, a werewolf, had been used as entertainment in the show. Harum Scarum frequently performed near Hackett's camp, where Caleb and Kaylee saw how Eliza was exploiting Silas and decided it was inhumane. They staged a fire as an excuse to set Silas free. Shortly thereafter, Silas bit Caleb, who then bit Kaylee and Chris. Since then, the Hackett family has been hunting Silas in hopes of ending the curse. Eliza, grieving and enraged, smears a vial of blood on her face. She walks into an explosion, declaring that she's coming for Silas. On the island, Max is seen covered in blood and is confused about why he's stuck in a tree. The branch he's standing on breaks, and he falls to the walkway below. Max walks back to the treehouse. He checks his bag for his clothes, but Emma had taken them earlier. With few options, he checks Laura's bag and comically decides to wear her clothes. He tells himself to find Laura and starts walking through the woods. On the path, he finds Laura's hat and notes that she must have come back for him at some point. Max stands at the pier and decides to wait out the night. Inside the lodge, Caitlin and Dylan return from the scrapyard and barricade the front door. It begins to rain and thunder. Caitlin mentions that the rain has been on and off, which buys them some time, as werewolves are fearful of water. Caitlin wants to find a vantage point and prepare to fight off any other werewolves. They head to the balcony, where they hear loud growling and noises coming from above. In the woods, Jacob escapes the Hackett house and talks to himself, apologizing and blaming himself for sabotaging the van's engine, which forced everyone to stay another night. He expresses regret as he sits alone in the woods. Inside the lodge, Abby and Emma find Chris's surveillance room. In the lobby, a werewolf bursts through the painting on the chimney and drops in. Caitlin and Dylan run into another room. Caitlin blocks the door while Dylan escapes into a different room. The werewolf pounds on the door. Abby and Emma see Caitlin on the cameras fleeing. Abby suggests letting her in, but Emma says the door is locked from the outside. Caitlin continues running and heads upstairs. Abby remembers the silver shell she was given earlier and says she can pass it to Caitlin if she runs by their door. Caitlin decides to jump out a window onto the roof. She carefully makes her way across to another window, with the werewolf close behind. She runs downstairs and reunites with Dylan. They head further downstairs, where they hear Abby and Emma banging on a door. Dylan says there's no time to waste investigating, but Caitlin thinks for a moment. Dylan decides to hide in the kitchen. Caitlin runs to Abby and Emma, who roll a silver bullet to her under the door. Caitlin loads the gun and runs back through the lobby. In a critical showdown, the werewolf charges at her, but she successfully lands a fatal blow. The werewolf convulses and dies. Dylan comes out of the kitchen wielding a frying pan, reuniting with Caitlin. On the highway, Travis, Ryan, and Laura are driving to where Travis believes they will find Silas. Laura questions how they will find Silas. Suddenly, Silas jumps on top of the car, knocking out both Travis and Ryan momentarily. Laura grabs the wheel as Travis regains consciousness. She slams the handbrake, causing Silas to fly off the roof. They try to run him over, but he escapes into the woods. Travis grabs his gun and wants to investigate. Ryan wakes up and asks what just happened. Travis calls for them to come around the back, saying he found a blood trail leading into the forest. Frustrated, Laura mentions this is the spot where she and Max were run off the road 2 months ago. Travis senses Laura's anger over what he's done to them over the past few months. He hands her the gun, daring her to shoot him. Laura takes the gun and debates it, but ultimately decides not to. Travis says he usually has werewolf blood on him but doesn't have any left, making this a high-risk hunt for Silas with the potential for death. He asks if they're ready to finally end the curse. Laura confidently says she is. Travis begins to follow the trail. Ryan stops Laura and gives her 1 vial of werewolf blood, knowing it will protect her. She declines at first, but Ryan explains there's only enough for 1 person. Thankful, she accepts the blood and smears it on her face. Along the trail, Laura mentions this is the spot where she saw a woman whispering the name Silas. Travis insists that's impossible, as Eliza, Silas's mother, should be dead. He recounts the origins of the werewolf curse, explaining the story of Silas and how Eliza exploited him for their traveling sideshow, Harum Scarum. He explains the fire started by Caleb and Kaylee, and how when they freed Silas, he bit Caleb, beginning the curse on the Hackett family. Laura and Ryan finally understand Travis's burden and why the Hacketts have been hunting Silas every full moon for the past 6 years. They arrive at an abandoned location that looks exactly like the burned down sideshow. Ryan wanders off down a short path, where Eliza screams Silas into his ear. Freaked out, he runs back to the group. Travis takes it as a sign they're getting close. Further along, they hear low growling. They quietly move forward and find Silas, injured and lying in his nest. Eliza can be heard whispering, pleading with them not to harm Silas. Laura becomes emotional, feeling sympathy for him. Travis asks what she's waiting for, and demands she shoot immediately. Laura raises her gun and fires a fatal shot, officially ending the curse on everyone who had been bitten and bringing the wild story of Hackett's Quarry to an end. As the morning sun rises, a short summary reveals who survived and who perished during the night. Beginning with Max, he survived after Ryan killed Chris with a silver shell, curing him. Bobby Hackett died when werewolf Chris mauled him. Jedediah Hackett died when werewolf Chris mauled him. Constance Hackett died when werewolf Chris mauled her. Chris Hackett died when Ryan, his favorite counselor, shot him with a silver bullet. Kaylee Hackett died when Laura shot her with silver at the pool, mistaking her for Chris. Jacob survived after being freed from the Hackett's basement and escaping. Nick survived after Laura killed Silas, curing him. Abby survived by sheltering inside Chris's surveillance room. Emma survived by sheltering in Chris's surveillance room. Dylan survived after hiding in the kitchen during the final lodge showdown. Caitlin survived after killing the werewolf, who turned out to be Caleb. Caleb Hackett died after being shot with silver by Caitlin. In a tragic twist, Travis lived to see the curse lifted from his family, only for all of them to be dead by morning. Ryan survived after shooting Chris, curing his werewolf curse, and surviving the encounter with Silas. Laura survived after killing Silas, curing everyone else who had been cursed. Silas died after being shot by Laura with silver, officially ending the curse of Hackett's Quarry. If you've made it to the end, feel free to share your thoughts, such as any plot holes you noticed, your favorite character, whether the Hackett family deserved their fate, or any other details that stood out. Thank you for watching, and until next time, take care.